Hi guys, welcome to this video where we will talk about basically the impact that Beowulf has in society. Hold on. Have you ever heard of Beowulf? No? Ever?
Oh, really?
Well, for those who are oblivious, Beowulf is an old English epic poem that tells a story of a king who slaughters a monster to protect his people. Okay, so here we have summarized the whole story of Beowulf in order to help you understand the story better and easier.
Before we continue explaining about Beowulf, we will tell you a quick summary of the poem. The story began from Hrothgar, a Danish king who built a hall named Heorot. This hall was terrorized by a monster named Grendel. Beowulf heard that Grendel was killing Hrothgar's soldiers in Heorot, and so he sailed with his men to help Hrothgar get rid of Grendel. Beowulf and his men spent the night at Heorot and waited for Grendel to turn up. When the monster appeared, Beowulf and his men attacked the troll-like monster with their swords. But the monster, which was described as resembling a troll, could not be killed with a blade, as Beowulf soon realized. So he did what man would fear to do. He wrestled with the monster with his bare hands, eventually tearing off one of its arms. Grendel fled, eventually dying from his wound. Grendel's death triggered his mother's anger, and finally she wanted to have her revenge. Beowulf would not just sit tight, so he went to the lair of Grendel's mother and had fierce combat with her. During the battle, he knew that sword would not harm her. No exception for hand-to-hand combat, until he found a magic sword from the pile of treasure in the lair. Once again, Beowulf gained victory and slew the monster. Now, Beowulf became a hero. After taking the prize from Hrothgar, Beowulf and his men went back to his homeland. "50 years passed. Beowulf became a king. In this last part of the story of Beowulf, he encountered his last enemy, which was a dragon. This dragon was angry due to a thief who stole a treasure from the dragon, and the dragon suspected it was someone from Beowulf's kingdom. After the dragon's attack, Beowulf and his men once again went to the dragon's lair to end the terror. Beowulf fought the dragon bravely, but he was not the same as when he was young. He ended up getting wounded so severely. Beowulf's men fled in fear, except Beowulf, who aided his master to fight the dragon. The dragon finally got killed. Our hero Beowulf received serious damage until he finally died from his wounds. The poem ended with Beowulf's burial at the sea.
Okay, in this section of talk, we'll discuss some important impacts that Beowulf brings in both Anglo-Saxon and modern era. So the first one is the impact of Beowulf towards the people in Anglo-Saxon era. So kinship or loyalty. The Anglo-Saxon value of kinship is intertwined with loyalty. Now, the term loyalty here, in the Anglo-Saxon context, bears the meaning of total faithfulness of one's kin to the extent of blood feuds. Firstly, it might be seen as essential to the concept of familial ties. This action is also apparent in the villain's action in the poem, namely Grendel's mother. If we are to make a logical connection, thus Grendel's mother goes to the killing in order to avenge her son's death. As relevant to the description by the epic's narrator, Grendel and his mother is a monster with human characteristics. They can think and act like humans. We can conclude that these two villains in this poem have as much comprehension as the humans regarding the view of kinship and loyalty. In response to this, a certain awareness is not unlikely to occur. Why? Because as the time went by and society grew, people started to think and began to see something was not quite right. What was not quite right? The answer is that system, the blood feud system. Therefore, such blood feuds apparent within monstrous creatures become less human, and the way of thinking among people gradually developed into that which we could assume one of the many kinds of revolutions. So, in order to pay for one's mistake of killing another's kinsman, one is to pay with money. This is what we call workout. The second one is Christianization. I say we can have more than one point of view in whether Beowulf holds pagan values or implies Christianization's mission, or both, because the poem narrates this tale in a pagan-like violent and vengeful atmosphere, but also mentions Cain and the ancestor of Grendel. The supposition is that the tale was first narrated by a Christian. Therefore, from this point, several visions can be extracted. The first one is the story was made this way to adapt to the society which had already beginning to convert to Christianity, or the story itself was made to commence the mission of Christianization itself, to which people's response and attitude may vary according to their initial state and their process of digesting the Christian values implanted in the poem. If this one was the case, then the poem was meant to be the device for introducing Christianity. Another point that we have is the role of Maid Hall in the story of Beowulf with the accordance of Christianization. Maid Hall in the Beowulf story. The story of Beowulf follows King Hrothgar of Denmark, a descendant of great King Skjaldsson, who enjoys a prosperous and successful reign. He builds a great mead hall called Harrowed, where his warriors gather to drink, receive gifts from the Lord, and listen to stories by the scopes. This mead hall is later being attacked by a horrible monster who lived in a swampland near King Hrothgar's kingdom. It is called Grendel. The jubilant noise from this place annoyed Grendel and angered him. The importance of wine that was kept in mead hall as a sacrament. Mead hall in Germanic custom is used as the distribution of food and drink in a ceremonial setting, the giving and receiving honorifics and awards, and the establishment of communal identity to the person called Lord or Lady. In the compound mead hall, element mead stands for all alcoholic drinks, including beer, wine, cider, probably others. These drinks held a very special place in Anglo-Saxon cultural life as extraordinary substances which could have potent effects on human beings, like stimulating warmth and affection, lust, anger, envy, and oratory. For these and other reasons, alcoholic drinks in pre-Christian Germanic Europe seem to have been regarded as a sacrament, both the pathway to the gods and the road to hell. And then we've come to the impact that Beowulf has in modern era and society. First one is the evil of the villain in pop culture. Gardner's Grendel is the instance where the monster's villainous traits is first questioned. Through this literary work, society grows yet another different concept in viewing human traits. As Beowulf an exemplary of heroism, Gardner's Grendel is a turning point where we begin to see the duality of every human. Beowulf might have appeared mighty, but the Grendel who thought of the human race as ruthless, greedy creatures introduced the minds of modern people to begin to criticize human characters. And the second one is the value of leadership. Beowulf is the king of Kitland, whom also led the 15 best Kitland warriors defeated Grendel in Danes. Then, Grendel's mother took revenge by killing one of Beowulf's retainers, by ripping their arms just the same as what Beowulf did to Grendel. By that accident, Beowulf as the leader was triggered and vows to avenge the death. He and his retainers found the mother's den, and Beowulf himself came alone to attack and defeated Grendel's mother. This shows a good trait which represents good leader figure in modern society, which are the ability to control and leading others, and having an awareness of his big responsibility that is related with how he sacrificed himself to take revenge to his retainer's death. The third one is self-sacrifice. The bravery of King Beowulf in taking revenge of his retainer's death, not to mention in being wounded because of fighting with dragon, is considered as a good trait that not every human can have. This shows self-sacrifice. That aspect of Beowulf resembles modern military fighters who put their lives in harm's way out of duty to country. And the last impact that Beowulf has in modern society is achievement and obsession. It's human traits to be obsessed with achievement and try to get something in order to reach another purpose behind. Take an example from a kid who studies hard for an Olympiad. Besides wanting to get a medal, They also want to get a praise or gift from their parents. In Beowulf's case, the achievement is defeating monsters and celebrated it and got reward. This is perhaps a reflection on society's obsession with wealth, and many will go to acquire it.
Many teachers, scholars, literary critics, and even students have argued and continue to argue that there is no merit in studying the Anglo-Saxon poem Beowulf. However, there are several key reasons why Beowulf is a valid unit of study in high school English today. Thanks to Tolkien's 1936 lecture, Beowulf, the Monsters and the Critics, in which he champions the merits of the Anglo-Saxon poem, many people begin to reconsider the epic poem's worth. He acknowledged the opposing criticism of the poem and recognized that it lacks in overall sophistication, but still saw valid reasons for not dismissing it as a piece of serious literary work. So, these are the reasons that makes Beowulf important in education. 1. It's a great debate. The very fact that Beowulf has received so much back and forth debate among literary critics, writers, teachers, and scholars proves that it is an excellent work for students to study. It gives students the chance to debate the merits of the poem so they can practice their argumentation and rhetoric skills through speaking and writing. 2. It is historically important. Beowulf gives the reader insight into the history of England and what eventually became British literature because it is the oldest surviving English poem from the Anglo-Saxon period. The influences of British literature on the rest of the world are numerous and enormous, and being able to compare or contrast modern journeys with one dating back approximately 1,000 years enables students to see the arc of how story has changed. From an archetypal standpoint, Beowulf presents several common story motifs and literary elements that have influenced how story is shaped today. Again, this provides an excellent basis for class debate. Why is the Beowulf poem historically significant? I assure you that the students will respond in kind. 3. It's not so simple. Upon closer reading, I would argue that the poem is not so simple as that. For one thing, the hero dies at the end of the story after being warned about pride from Hrothgar. And the hero dies while looking at his treasure, a mark of greed, power, and selfishness. So, what is the Beowulf poetry really up to? The poem may not be just a monster story after all. Perhaps there is something deeper beyond the surface. Again, this provides the students with ample discussion and debate on whether the hero, Beowulf, dies heroically or shamefully, whether he is a successful hero or a failed one. I don't know about you. Another point, it provides valuable insight into the culture and values of the society in which it was composed and retold. Modern Anglo-American culture is influenced by the culture of the ancient Anglo-Saxon people, and reading Beowulf can help readers and students to discover the influences. And it is a good example of poetry. It can help introduce the students to poetry because of its concept: heroic, enjambment, alliteration, accentual, verse, metaphor, and imaginary. We may wonder how Beowulf ran the kingdom of Geats and how was their relation with other kingdoms beside Danes. After a long time of research and tried to find the information about that, there are not so many resources which explain about this. But
6.5 hours later,
we find something on enotes.com. Someone with the username The Tall,
A certified educator, according to enotes.com, explains that Beowulf had ruled Gittland peacefully for 50 winters, which means 50 years, and no war or problem were explained. Another source explains that Beowulf had slain Onela, the king of Sweden, who the kingdom itself were in war with Geats after the Geatish king, Ratho, died. From this, we can see how Beowulf brought more peace to his land and people were happy with that. Although Geats' relation with Sweden is apparently not well, but from Beowulf's deed on the kingdom of Danes, it created a good relationship between both kingdoms. Of course, during Beowulf period, feudal system still occurred. Although it wasn't mentioned how it ran on Beowulf period, but we can see how Hickleff, as Beowulf's second hand in command, and other warriors served Beowulf. From what is portrayed in the poem of Beowulf, we can conclude that it reflects how the kingdom during that era was ruled, how the relation between the two kingdoms, and how a king ruled his kingdom.
The Old English epic Beowulf, with the highest achievement of Old English literature, has always been an interesting topic to be discussed and analyzed further. One aspect that has caught our attention is the relevance of Beowulf in economical aspect. Beowulf is that one story which shines and glitters with treasures. They portrayed a lot of fine objects with rich textures. Rich objects of war like swords, helmets, and neck rings was invested in the poem. The culture of giving gifts of treasure that build personal bond that hold the society together. The economy is apparent in Beowulf with the gift-giving, which is actually much more about the society than the economy. Also, Beowulf constantly stresses the importance of gift-giving system for the rewards of heroic and courageous behavior. The story when Beowulf finally defeated the monsters, his heroic accomplishments are praised, and the praises are in the form of jewels, armor, and fine valuable weapons. The people in Beowulf deal with one another with valuable material goods. Gift-giving was essential in the etiquette of dealing in Anglo-Saxon England. It is closely related particularly to the elite that has a high social status. Greater economic power tends to have an implication of superiority. I, as the writer, am interested in a rich elite society that may reflect the early economic system. One substance that is present significantly is gold. Silver is not mentioned at all, and gems are rare. Gold becomes the material of gift-giving from one another, as well as the substance for weapons and armor. Gold shillings appeared in England in the early 7th century and produced into silver pennies in the same century. In the early 8th century, silver coins were being made and used with a great quantity. At that time, precious metal was used as a payment or bequest, which includes rings, jewelry, gold, and silver weapons. And they had the same value as money today. The wealth is given to the king and was later distributed to the people. This kind of economy produces great wealth, temporarily because the most violent leaders and clans tend to thrive. Furthermore, the land transaction is deeply wired in the Anglo-Saxon. Land transaction is closely related to the elite society or for those who aspire to be in the society. In Beowulf poem, the hero passed his gifts from Hrothgar to Hygelac and were immediately given a land in return. Land transaction is the aspect of Anglo-Saxon that is still apparent in contemporary economy. Gift-giving in gold and silver were the symbols of elite society in Anglo-Saxon England,
And Beowulf helped to build the conception of readers that they also position themselves in the same lifestyle.
So guys, that's all for the impact that Beowulf has in society. And if you want to dive in further, we also discuss about the impact of Beowulf in literature aspect. And should there be any wonder, you can check it out by clicking the link in the description below. See you!